In the beginning, there was no shape to anything, and no edge to anything, and no place that could be called a place. There was only a great dim openness that had no floor and no roof and no sides, a wide, unformed dark that stretched away without ending, because there was nothing in it yet to make an ending. The old people gave that first state a name that meant a kind of yawning, a gap, an emptiness with room in it, and nothing filling the room. And they did not describe it at length, because there was very little in it to describe. It was dark, and it was wide, and it was still, and it lay there through a long age in which nothing happened at all, the way a winter field lies under the night with no one crossing it. Then slowly, the way mist gathers along the low ground before dawn, without anyone there to watch it gather, the emptiness began to take on shapes. It was not sudden. Nothing in this oldest part of the story is ever sudden, and that is one of the reasons it is a good thing to fall asleep inside of. The dark thickened here and settled there, the way fine silt settles through still water over many quiet hours and becomes, at the last, a floor. And out of that settling and gathering and slow thickening came the first solid thing, which was the earth, a wide dark steadying underneath everything, low and patient and enormous, spread out beneath the openness like the bed of a sea before any sea has been poured into it. The earth, in the oldest telling, was the first mother of everything that followed, and she was calm and broad and deep, and she brought forth out of herself, over long ages, the shapes of the world one after another, without haste. She brought forth the hills, raising them slowly out of her own broad back, rounded and gray-green and gentle, rising one behind another, until the furthest of them faded into the haze. She brought forth the long valleys between the hills, and the hollows where water would one day gather, and the plains that ran out flat toward where the sea would be. And over all of it, last and highest, she brought forth the sky, lifting it up out of herself to be a covering, a great calm arch of air laid over the land from edge to edge, so that for the first time there was an above and a below, and a between for things to happen in. For a long age the sky lay close over the earth, the two of them near together, the arch of the air resting low upon the hills, the way a lid rests upon a jar. And in the warm, close dark between them, the first great powers of the world came into being and grew. These were the elder ones, the first family, older than the gods that people would later know. And they were as broad and slow and enormous as the land that had made them. And there were a great many of them, and their names were the names of large calm things, the ocean and the rivers, the light and the dark, memory and law, and the turning round of time. They lived in the close, warm country between the earth and the low sky, and they grew, and the world with them, and it was quiet. And then, in time, there came a change, and the change was the first great event in the story. And this telling is going to give it the shape it truly had, which was the shape of a change in the weather. For the sky had lain low and close over the earth for a long age, and it came to pass that the sky drew up and away, lifted, and went high, and settled at the great height where it has stayed ever since, where before the air had rested warm and close upon the hills. Now it stood far off and vast overhead, and between the risen sky and the waiting earth there opened all the wide clear room in which weather could move and clouds could cross, and the winds could run from one edge of the world to the other. It was as if a roof that had pressed low had been lifted to let the air in, and afterwards everything below it breathed more easily, and the light came in from the sides, and the sky was quieter and higher and further away than it had ever been, and it never came down close again. The one who saw to that lifting was among the youngest of the elder family, a great slow power named Kronos. And after the sky went high, it was Kronos who came into the ruling of things, the way the youngest of a long family sometimes comes, quietly, and without much being said, into the keeping of the house. And so the first age ended, the close, warm age of the low sky, and the second age began, the wide age of the high sky and the open weather. And the earth lay broad and green under the risen air, with the room above her that she has kept ever since. And that is as much as needs telling of the very beginning, and it is mostly a matter of shapes settling out of the dark, and a roof being lifted to let the air in. There was a first darkness, and then a floor came out of it, and then the hills, and the valleys, and the plains, and then the sky was raised up high to make room, and the elder family lived in the room that the raising had made. The world at the end of that first long age was a wide, dim country under an enormous, quiet sky, waiting, with the light coming across it low and level, and nothing on it yet that walked or spoke, only the great slow powers going about the long calm business of holding the new-made world together while the ages turned. The age of Kronos was afterwards remembered as a long and quiet time, and some of the old people, looking back on it from the noise of their own days, called it a golden age, by which they meant only that it was calm, and that the seasons were gentle, and that nothing much happened that anyone needed to be afraid of. Kronos ruled over the elder family from no particular place, because in those days there were no cities, and no thrones, and no walls, only the wide green world under the high sky, and he ruled it the slow way that a season rules, by simply going on, so that one year followed another, and the corn came up in the warm ground on its own, and the fruit weighed down the branches in its time, and the herds grew fat in the long meadows, and there was enough, and no one had yet invented the wanting of more than enough. Beside him in the ruling was Rhea, who was his sister and his wife, a great calm mother power of the same elder kind, broad and deep and patient as the earth she had come from. And where Kronos was the keeper of the turning year, Rhea was the keeper of the living things that were born into it, the mothering, the bringing forth, the quiet, unshowy work of making the next of everything out of the last of it. The two of them together held the world in its long, even course through that whole slow age. And for a good while it went on without change, the way a river goes on through flat country, wide and unhurried, seeming hardly to move at all. In the fullness of that time, children were born to Rhea and Kronos, and these children were of a new kind, younger and brighter and quicker than the great slow elder powers, and they were the first of the gods that people would later know and name and bring offerings to. But here the old story tells a strange and shadowed thing, and this telling is going to give it the gentle shape and leave the shadow out of it, because the gentle shape is the true heart of it anyway. It was said that Kronos, who was the keeper of time, and who knew, as the keeper of time must know, that his own long age would one day give way to a younger age, as surely as autumn gives way to winter, did not wish to give it up. And so, as each of the bright new children was born, Kronos took the child and kept it. He kept them close, and he kept them hidden, and he kept them from growing up into the day when one of them might come into the ruling in his place. And so, for a while, the children were not seen in the world at all, but were held somewhere apart, and safe, and out of the turning of things, waiting. Rhea bore them, one after another over the years, and one after another they were taken and kept. And Rhea, who was a mother before she was anything else, grieved quietly through those years, the way the earth grieves in the cold half of the year, without noise, but deeply. And when the youngest of the children was coming, she made up her mind that this one at least would grow up in the open world, and she went to her own mother, the broad old earth, for counsel, the way daughters have always gone to their mothers. And between the two of them, the young mother and the ancient one, they arranged a quiet and clever thing. When the youngest was born, Rhea gave the child secretly into the keeping of the earth, to be raised far off and hidden on an island, in a cave in the green side of a mountain, where the sound of a growing child would be lost in the sound of the wind and the leaves. And to Kronos she gave, in the child's place, a stone wrapped and swaddled as a baby is wrapped. And Kronos took the stone and kept it with the rest, and did not know the difference. And so the youngest child was safe. That youngest child was Zeus, and he grew up on the hidden island, the way any child grows up who is raised far from the great affairs of the world, slowly and out of sight, tended by the nymphs of the place and the creatures of the mountain, fed on the milk of a gentle goat and the honey of the wild bees, while the wind in the mouth of the cave covered the small sounds of his growing. And the years went by on the island, quiet green years of a child becoming a young man among the goats and the bees and the running mountain streams, far from Kronos and far from the keeping of the world. And Kronos his long, even age, and did not know that the season was already slowly turning under him. And when Zeus was grown, the time came for the children who had been kept to be kept no longer. And this is the part that the old story tells darkly. And this telling tells plainly and kindly, because plainly and kindly is nearer the truth of what it meant. The children who had been held apart all those years were, in the end, given back. They came out of their long keeping into the open world, one after another, grown now and bright and strong. Brothers and sisters meeting for the first time in the daylight. And the stone that had stood in the youngest one's place was given back too, and set down in the world as a marker of the whole strange business. A plain stone in a plain place that people would point to long afterward. And so the bright younger family that had been hidden and held and kept out of the turning of things for a whole long age came at last all together into the light of the world, and stood there and looked at the wide green country and the high quiet sky. And the second age began to draw toward its close. What followed, when the younger family had all come together into the light, was the passing of the rule from the elder ones to the younger. And it is remembered in the old stories as a great struggle, an age-long contest between the elder powers and the younger, told with much noise and much weather. And there was, in the telling of it, a kind of quarrel among them, a long disagreement between the old age and the new, about which of them should have the keeping of the world. What is remembered of the middle of it is mostly weather. It is enough to say that there was a disagreement among the great powers of the world about who should hold it, and that the disagreement went on for a long time, the way a spell of heavy weather goes on, with the sky low and dark and troubled over everything, and that then, in its own time, it passed, the way heavy weather passes. And afterwards, the sky was quieter. That is the truest thing to say about it. Afterwards, the air cleared, and the light came back across the world level and calm, and the long, low pressure that had lain over everything lifted and was gone. And when it had gone, it was the younger family that held the world, and the elder family that had let it go. The great, slow elder powers, the ones who had ruled through the long golden age, withdrew after that into a far quiet country of their own, a deep and distant place at the very roots of the world, low down and far off and settled, where they went to their long rest the way the old go to rest by the fire, while the young keep the house. They were not gone from the world exactly. They were only very far down and very far away in the deep foundations of things, holding up from underneath the world they no longer had to run. And the world above went on without them, lighter now and quicker, and in the hands of the young. There were 3 brothers at the head of the younger family, 3 sons of Rhea grown to their full strength, and their names were Zeus and Poseidon and Hades. And when the world was theirs to keep, they did a sensible and orderly thing, which was to divide it between them, so that each should have his own part to look after, and none should have to carry the whole of it alone. They did not fight over the dividing. The old story says they drew lots for it, the way careful brothers settle a shared inheritance by drawing straws, so that chance and not strength should choose, and no one should have cause for grievance, and each took the part that the drawing gave him and was content. To Zeus, the youngest, the one who had grown up hidden on the island, fell the sky and the high air and the weather, all the wide bright country above the earth, the clouds and the winds and the rain and the light, and with it a kind of first place among the 3, not a rule over his brothers, but a sitting at the head of the table, so that he became the one the others looked to, the keeper of the high places and of the order of things, and he took the high mountains for his seat and the whole vault of the air for his keeping. To Poseidon fell the sea, the whole great restless salt plain of it that ran around all the edges of the land and under all the world, the deep water and the shallow, the tides and the currents and the springs that come up cold out of the ground. And he went down into it and made it his, and became the keeper of everything that moves in water and everything that water moves. And to Hades, the eldest brother, fell the 3rd part, which was the dim country under the earth, the still low place at the bottom of everything, where the old people believed that all living things go at the last. And he went down into it quietly and made it his, and became the keeper of that great calm country, and seldom came up out of it again. And the earth herself, the broad old mother of them all, and the high sky, and the open air between. These were held in common, shared ground that belonged to none of the three alone, and to all of them together, so that the world after the dividing was not three separate worlds, but one world with three keepers, the bright one above, the deep one in the water, and the quiet one below, each minding his own great house, and all three joined at the edges, the way a hill joins its valley. So the world settled into the shape it has kept ever since. The long golden age of the elder family was over and gone, folded away into the deep foundations of things, and the age of the younger gods had come, the age that people would afterward live in and tell stories about, with Zeus in the high air, and Poseidon in the sea, and Hades in the country below, and the earth green and broad between them under the risen sky. It was a more various world than the old calm one had been, quicker and brighter, and more full of comings and goings. But it was, at the bottom, an orderly world, a world with its parts parceled out, and each part in careful keeping. And the light lay across it, level and gold in the evenings, the way it had lain across the world since the very beginning, and would go on lying long after all of this. The younger gods, once the world was theirs and divided, needed a place to be when they were not about their business in it. And they took for that place the top of a high mountain in the north of Greece, a mountain so tall that its head stood up above the weather, in the clear air, where the clouds gathered about its shoulders, but never quite reached its summit. The mountain was called Olympus, and on the top of it, in the old belief, was a wide, calm country of its own, above the reach of rain and wind, where the light was always even and the air was always mild. And there the gods had their houses, and there they gathered, and from there they looked out over the world below and went down into it when they had reason to, and came back up when their reasons were done. There were 12 of them who were counted as the great ones, the household of the mountain. And it is a restful thing simply to go through them, one by one, and say what each of them looked after, the way a person half asleep might go along a shelf of familiar things in the dark and name each one by touch. So here they are, the 12, told plainly. First there was Zeus, whom the story has already met, the keeper of the sky and the weather and the head of the whole household, who looked after the high air and the gathering of the clouds and the order of things, and who was thought of as a keeper of oaths and of guests and of the law that holds a house together. Beside him was Hera, his wife, the keeper of marriage and of the household and of the settled life of families, a grave and stately power who looked after the vows people make to one another and the long keeping of them. Then Poseidon, the brother from the sea, who came up sometimes from his own great country to sit among them, the keeper of the water and the tides, and of horses too, and of the shaking of the ground. And Demeter, their sister, the keeper of the grain and the plowed field and the harvest, the one who saw to it that the corn came up green in the spring and stood gold in the late summer and fed the world, a mother power close to the old earth herself, and her story will come again a little later, because it is one of the gentlest of all of them. Then there were the younger ones, the children of the household. There was Athena, the keeper of wisdom and of good counsel and of the careful crafts, of weaving and of the making of useful things, and of the kind of quiet cleverness that solves a problem without noise, a gray-eyed and level-headed power much loved in the towns for the steadiness she stood for. There was Apollo, the keeper of light and of music and of healing and of the knowing of things to come, who looked after the sun's course and the playing of the lyre and the health of people, a bright, calm power of order and clear sight. And there was his sister Artemis, the keeper of the wild country and the hunt and the wild animals in it, and of the moon, who kept to the woods and the hills and the untilled places, and looked after the young of every wild thing, a cool and solitary power of the forest and the night. There was Ares, the keeper of quarrels and of the harsher edges of things, and of him this telling will say only that he was the one who looked after the parts of the world that people would rather not think about, and that he was the least visited of all the household, kept mostly apart, and that the other gods did not much love his company, and the story always rather hurried past him, and so will this. There was Aphrodite, the keeper of love and of longing, and of the drawing of one thing toward another, who was said to have come up long before out of the sea near an island, born of the foam on the water, and to have come ashore in the mild light and brought sweetness into the world. And she looked after all the tenderness there is between living things. There was Hephaestus, the keeper of fire and of the forge, and of the making of things out of metal, a great craftsman who worked at a furnace in a low place under the mountain, quiet and apart, and a little lame in his walk. And out of his forge came all the finest made things in the old stories, and the sound of his hammer was thought to be the deep sound that comes up sometimes out of the fire mountains. And there was Hermes, the keeper of roads and of travelers and of messages and of trade, the quickest and most restless of them all, who went up and down between the mountain and the world, and even down into the country below and back again, the one who carried word from one place to another and looked after everyone who was on a journey. And to fill out the 12 there was Hestia, the keeper of the hearth and of the fire that burns in the middle of every house, the quietest and gentlest of the whole household, who kept to the mountain and to the tending of the central flame, and asked for nothing, and was honored first at every table, the still center around which the rest of them turned. In some of the tellings, her place among the 12 was later given over to Dionysus, the keeper of the vine and of the wine and of the loosening of care, who came into the household after the others. But the shape of the thing is the same either way, a household of 12, each with a part of the world to look after, gathered on the mountain in the clear air above the weather. That was the house on the mountain. Then 12 great powers and their keeping, the sky and the marriage vow, the grain and the wisdom, the light and the wild wood, the love and the forge and the road and the hearth, all of them together in the mild, even air at the top of the world, looking down over the green country and the gray sea, and going about their long affairs, while the people below tilled their fields and sailed their ships, and told in the evenings these very stories about them. For a long while after the gods had settled on the mountain, the world below them was a world without people in it. There were the hills and the rivers and the woods and the wide grazing plains, and there were the animals in their kinds. But there was no one yet who kept a hearth, or plowed a field, or told a story in the evening. And the story now comes to how that changed, and it comes to it gently, because the making of people in the old telling is a quiet craftsman's business and not a loud one. Among the elder powers who had not gone down with the rest into the deep country, but had stayed and taken the side of the younger gods, there was one named Prometheus, whose name meant something like the one who thinks ahead, the forward-looking one, and he was the cleverest and the kindest of all that older kind. And it was Prometheus in the oldest tellings who made the first people, and he made them the way a potter makes a thing, out of earth and water, shaping them with his hands from the clay of the ground, working slowly and carefully until they stood upright and could walk, small and new and blinking in the daylight. And he was fond of them, and he watched over them. But the first people were cold. They had no fire, and without fire they could not warm themselves against the winter, nor cook their food, nor light the dark, nor work any metal, and they lived thin and shivering lives in the raw weather. And Prometheus, looking at them, was sorry for them. And so he did the thing he is most remembered for, which was to bring them fire. Fire in those days was a thing kept up on the mountain, in the high country of the gods, and not meant for the world below. But Prometheus went up and took a little of it, a single ember carried hidden in the dry pith of a tall reed, the way a traveler carries a coal from one camp to the next. And he brought that hidden ember down the mountain and gave it to the people, and taught them how to keep it and feed it and never let it go quite out. And the gift of fire changed everything for them, the way it would. Now they had light in the dark, and warmth against the cold, and a way to cook, and to bake, and to fire the clay into pots, and to soften the metal and beat it into tools. And the little cold lives grew warmer and longer and more able, and the smoke of the first hearth fires went up in thin blue threads all across the evening world, where before there had been only the dark. That was the gift, and it was a great one, and it was given out of kindness, and the people never forgot it. But there was a price on it for the giver, because the fire had been taken from the high country without leave, and the keeping of order is a stern business, and Prometheus was called to answer for what he had done. And the answer laid on him was a long one. He was taken far off to a lonely mountain at the edge of the world, and bound there, held fast to the cold rock in the high wind, and left, and there he stayed through age after age, a long confinement in a high and solitary place, keeping his silence, waiting for the far-off day when the long sentence would be done and he would be loosed. And loosed he was in the end long afterward by one of the great heroes who came that way. And for now, it is enough to know that the one who gave people fire paid a long, quiet price for it on a far mountain, and that people had their fire and kept it. And there is one more thing to tell in this part, and it is the gentlest of all, and it is the story of why the year has a warm half and a cold half, and it belongs to Demeter, the keeper of the grain, whom the household on the mountain has already named. Demeter had a daughter, a bright young power named Persephone, whom she loved beyond anything. And the two of them went about the green world together in the early days. And where they went, the flowers came up, and the grain grew. And it was always the warm part of the year, because Demeter was happy, and the earth is glad when the keeper of the grain is glad. But the time came when the daughter grew, as daughters do, and went to live a part of her life apart from her mother, down in the quiet country below the ground, in the still, dim, orderly house of Hades, the brother who kept the world below. And there she became in her own right a keeper of that low country, a grave and gentle power of the place under the earth. And Demeter, when her daughter was away below, grieved, the way a mother grieves when the house is empty. And while she grieved, she let the world go cold. The grain stopped growing. The leaves fell, and the trees stood bare, and the ground went hard and gray. And the first winter came into the world out of a mother's quiet sorrow at an empty house. And then the arrangement was made that has held ever since, which is that the daughter should spend one part of every year below, in the quiet country with the keeper of it, and one part of every year above, in the green world with her mother. And so each year, when the daughter comes back up into the light, Demeter is glad again, and the warmth returns, and the ground softens, and the flowers come up, and the grain grows green, and then gold. And that is the spring and the summer, the glad half of the year. And each year when the daughter goes back down again to the country below, the mother grieves again, and the cold comes back, and the leaves fall, and the ground hardens. And that is the autumn and the winter, the quiet half. And so it goes, round and round, the going down and the coming up, the cold half and the warm half, the daughter between the two houses, and the mother's mood turning the whole world's weather, year after year after year, which is as gentle a reason for the seasons as anyone ever gave. After the world had people in it, and the people had spread out into their towns and their farms across the green country, there came, in time, the age of the heroes, which was the age that people liked best to tell stories about. The heroes were people mostly, or the children of a god and a person, and they were remembered for the journeys they made and the far places they went to. And there were a great many of them. And this telling is going to walk through a few of the most famous the way. A traveler walks past a row of distant hills, naming each one and going on, because each of them has been told at length elsewhere, and the pleasure here is in the naming and the going on, not in the stopping. There was Perseus, who came first. His mother was a woman named Danae, of the town of Argos, and her son was Perseus. And he grew up on a small island far from his mother's home. And when he was grown, he was sent on a long errand to the very edge of the world. For there lived, at the western edge of everything, in a lonely country past where the roads ran out, 3 sisters, and one of them was named Medusa. And the strange thing about her, the thing everyone knew, was that she was not to be looked at directly, that a traveler who came to that country kept his eyes turned away and looked only at reflections in polished bronze or in still water, and never straight on. And Perseus went all that long way west to that country at the edge, and he came into it carefully, with his eyes turned away, guided by gifts the gods had lent him. And he did the thing he had gone to do without ever once looking straight at what he had come for. And then he turned and came home again the long way. And that is the whole of it, as this telling gives it. A long journey west to a country no one looked at directly, and a long journey home. There was Heracles, the great one, whose whole story this channel has told on another night. And so here he is only a name in the row, and a list to be passed over lightly. He was a big, quiet, strong man who was given a long list of jobs by a nervous king, 12 of them, and he did them one at a time over many years, walking a great deal in between. And the jobs took him to a green hill, and a wet marsh, and a snowbound mountain, and a cattle yard by 2 rivers, and a long road north for a team of horses, and a war belt given freely, and the whole length of the sea, with a herd of red cattle, and a walled garden at the edge of the west. And at the very last, down into the quiet country below and back. And every one of those was mostly a long walk, with a single quiet afternoon of work in the middle of it. And the walking was the most of it. And the man himself, when he was old, remembered the roads and the rivers and the herds far more than anything else. And that is all that need be said of him here, because the rest is told on its own night. There was Theseus, who belonged to the town of Athens, and his most famous journey was a short sea crossing to a great island in the south, to the kingdom of a powerful king who kept, at the heart of his palace, a vast house of winding passages, a maze of stone corridors that turned and turned upon themselves, so that anyone who went in was lost. And at the center of it, something was kept that was not spoken of. And Theseus went across the sea to that island as one of a company of young people sent there. And he went into the great winding house of stone, and he was able to come out again, because a daughter of that king had given him a ball of thread, which he tied at the door and unwound behind him as he went in, so that however the passages turned, he had only to follow the thread back to find the way out. And he went in, and he came out, following the thread, and he took ship again, and sailed home to Athens. And the going in and the coming out by the thread is the part worth keeping. The calm cleverness of the thread in the turning dark. And there was Jason, whose journey was a voyage, the longest and most crowded of all the hero voyages, for he gathered a great company of the finest people of his age into a single long ship, a 50-oared ship named the Argo, and he sailed her from Greece away to the far eastern edge of the sea, to a distant shore under high mountains at the world's other end, to fetch back a famous thing that was kept there, a golden fleece, the shining hide of a ram, hung in a grove and watched over by a guardian that never slept. And the going there was the great thing, the long voyage out with the 50 oars, coasting from island to island and harbor to harbor, the the crowded deck, and the shared work, and the singing at the oars, week after week eastward to the end of the sea. And when they came at last to the far shore, Jason won the fleece and took it down, with help that was given him there, and hung it in the ship, and turned the long ship round, and the whole company bent to the oars again, and rowed the immense way home, and came back at last to Greece with the golden thing aboard. And that is the voyage of the Argo, a going out and a coming back across the whole eastern sea in a single long ship full of famous names. Those are 4 of them, then 4 of the heroes, passed in a row, each with a single far place at the end of a long road. The western country no one looked at. The list of 12 jobs, the winding house and the saving thread, the long ship and the golden fleece. There were many more of them, more than one night could hold, but they were all at bottom the same restful shape, a person going a long way to a far place and coming home again. And the far place, when they reached it, was over quickly and left behind. The greatest of all the old stories, the one that stood at the center of everything the Greeks remembered, was the story of a war at a city far across the sea, a city called Troy, that stood on a low hill above a windy plain near the water in the east. This channel has told that story on its own night, and so here it will be told only as it looked from a distance and from the outside, which is to say as 10 years of camps, and weather and ships drawn up on sand and men waiting, because that, and not the fighting, was the most of it, and the waiting is the part that is restful to hear. It began, the old story says, because a woman had gone away across the sea from a town in Greece to the city of Troy in the east, and the towns of Greece, being bound to one another by old promises, gathered together to sail after her and ask for her back. And so from every harbor and every island the ships came out, black ships with a single square sail and a long bank of oars, and they gathered into a great fleet, more ships than anyone had ever seen in one water, and the fleet sailed east across the whole sea to the shore below Troy. And the men drew the ships up out of the water onto the long beach, side by side, hull by hull, all along the sand, and there they made their camp. And there, as it turned out, they stayed for 10 years. 10 years is a very long time to sit before a city, truth of that war, under all the famous names, is that it was mostly waiting. A camp on a beach is a small town of its own, and this one became one, a long straggling town of huts and tents and shelters made from the ship's own timbers, strung out along the sand between the drawn-up hulls and the walls of the city on its hill, with the gray sea on one side and the windy plain on the other. And the men lived in it, year after year, the way people live anywhere, by the small routines of the day. They rose with the light. They cooked at their fires. They mended their gear and drew water and tended the animals they had brought and went out along the shore for firewood and sat in the long evenings looking at the sea and talking of home. And the weather came and went over them, the whole turning year of it, 10 times over. The wet gray winters when the sea got up and beat on the beach, and the ships had to be hauled higher, and the hot, still summers when the plain shimmered and the dust hung over everything, and the springs when the wind off the water was kind, and the autumns when the light went gold and level across the camp in the evenings, and the men grew quiet and homesick. And the war itself, the fighting that the story is famous for, happened out on the plain between the camp and the city. And from the camp, it was mostly something heard rather than seen, a thing that came and went out on the flat ground the way weather comes and goes, a distant sound rolling in off the plain on some days and gone again on others, the way thunder rolls along a far horizon on a summer afternoon and then moves off, and the sky over there clears again, and the day goes quiet. There were days when the sound of it came in from the plain, and days, many more days, when it did not, when the plain lay empty and hot and still under the sun, and nothing happened at all. And the men in the camp mended their gear and drew their water and waited, because a war up close and from the inside is far more waiting than anything else. Long, empty stretches of ordinary days strung between the few that anyone remembers. Great names were in that camp, on both sides, in the city and on the beach, the most famous names in all the old stories, and their doings out on the plain are the whole of the tale on the night it is properly told. But from where this telling stands, back among the drawn-up ships in the long evening, they were only men in a camp, men who had been away from home a very long time, who woke and worked and waited and slept and woke again. years of it, while the seasons turned over the beach, and the gray sea came and went against the sand. And it ended, in the end, the way the longest things end, quietly, after everyone had almost stopped expecting it to end at all. The old story says that at the very last, the Greeks made a great thing out of wood, an enormous wooden horse, and left it standing on the plain, and drew their ships down off the beach and sailed away, or seemed to, and the people of the city brought the wooden thing inside their walls. And after that, in a single night, the long war was over, and the 10 years on the beach were done. This telling leaves that last night where it lies, inside the walls, in the dark, and says only that the war ended, and that in the gray morning after it, the beach below Troy was empty, the ships gone from the sand where they had lain for 10 years, the long camp struck and abandoned, the fires cold, and nothing left on the shore but the marks in the sand where the hulls had rested, already softening in the wind, and the plain quiet, and the sea empty out to the horizon, and the whole enormous business over and beginning already to become a story. When the war was over and the ships came down off the beach at last and turned for home, the sea that they had crossed so easily on the way out did not let them all go back so easily, and the going home became, for some of them, a longer story than the war had been. This channel has told the longest of those homecomings on its own night, the story of one man who took 10 years to sail home from Troy. And so here it is only the shape of it that is wanted, the long turning voyage, told briefly, and then let go. For that one man, whose name was Odysseus, the way home from the war was itself a whole journey of years, blown off course from the start, and carried far out of his road into the strange western reaches of the sea, from island to island, harbor to harbor, one landfall after another, in places no chart had, held up a season here and a season there, always meaning to sail on toward home, and always somehow kept from it a little longer. There were storms in it, the sea getting up black and enormous, and driving the small ship where it would, and long calms after the storms when the ship lay still on a flat sea under a wide sky and made no way at all. There were green islands where he was made welcome and stayed, and bare islands where he did not, and the whole slow, scattered voyage westward and homeward went on for 10 years, as long as the war itself, before he came at last, alone by then, and much changed, back to his own small rocky island in the west of Greece, where his home was, and his people, and the quiet end of all that wandering. And that is the homecoming in its shape, a man 10 years on the water finding his long way back, and the rest is told on its own night. And here it is enough that he came home at the last, because they mostly did, in the end, the ones who came home at all. And now the whole great sweep of it is nearly told, from the first darkness at the beginning to the ships coming home from the war. And there is one place left to go, and it is the quietest place of all, and it is the right place to end, because it is the place all the stories end, and all the people in them, and it is not a fearful place, but a calm one. It is the country below, the dim, still land under the earth that the eldest of the 3 brothers took for his keeping in the long ago dividing of the world. And to it, in the end, everyone in all these stories went, and it is a gentle place. And this telling will end by going quietly down into it and describing it the way a traveler describes the last country on a long road. The way down to it, in the old belief, lay through certain deep caves and certain still dark waters at the edges of the world. And the country itself was a great dim land, level and gray and quiet, lit by no sun and troubled by no weather, where it was always the same soft, even half-light, neither day nor night, and always still. At its border ran a river, a wide, slow, dark river that circled the whole country, and the only way across it was by a boat, an old ferryman's boat that went back and forth across the still water carrying those who came, one quiet crossing at a time, the oars dipping and lifting with a small sound in the enormous silence, the far bank coming slowly nearer through the dim air. And at the great gate on the far side, where the country truly began, there sat a watchman, a large, calm dog who kept the threshold, and had kept it always, and knew everyone who came, and let them in. And within the gate, the country spread away, wide and gray and orderly and still, a great plain of soft half-light where the people who had lived went on quietly after their living was done, gathered in the dim meadows, moving without hurry or resting without care, the old kings and the old heroes and the ordinary people all together in the same calm country, all the striving gone out of them, all the roads walked, all the wars over, nothing left to do and nothing needing to be done. It was not a place of punishment, whatever later ages made of it. In the oldest and gentlest telling, it was only a place of rest, dim and settled and endlessly quiet, where the river ran slow and the boat went back and forth, and the watchman kept the gate, and the light never changed, and no one was in any hurry, and everyone who had ever set out on any of these long roads came, in the end, to lie down in the quiet of it and be at peace. And so the whole story comes round to its rest, from the first shapes settling out of the first darkness, through the long reign of the elder family, and the coming of the younger gods, and the dividing of the bright world into sky and sea, and the country below, through the house on the mountain, and the gift of fire, and the making of people, and the turning of the seasons, through the heroes on their long roads, and the ships before the far city, and the long ways home across the sea. All of it, in the end, coming down at the last into the same dim, quiet country under the ground, where the river runs slow and the light is soft, and even and the whole great company of the story lies down together at last in the calm, with nothing left to do, and rests somewhere at the border of that quiet country. The wide, dark river goes on running in the even half-light, the way it has always run and always will. The old ferryman's boat lies drawn up on the near bank, empty now, rocking a little where the slow water moves against it, and there is no one waiting to cross, and no hurry for anyone to come. The far bank is a soft gray line across the still water, going dim and then dimmer as the last of the light settles out of the air. The great calm dog sleeps at the distant gate. The reeds along the water stand without stirring. Nothing moves on the river but the slow current itself, dark and smooth and endless, carrying the last pale reflection of the sky away into the quiet. And the light goes long and gray and level across the water, and the whole of it grows still and stiller, and settles at last into the deep, even hush of a place where everything has arrived and nothing has anywhere left to go. Sleep well,